And most marketers and leadership don't understand email deliverability. And that's where it's key in getting them to recognize this is a priority. This has to be a priority. And if there's anything I can definitely say to your listeners, that it's got to be a priority no matter what. You just have to make sure that you're influencing those people bottom up.
Welcome to Email After Hours by Senderscore, powered by Validity.
We're your hosts. My name is Guy Hansen.
And I'm Danielle Gallant, and this is Email After Hours. On today's episode, we are going to dig into the nitty-gritty of ESP migrations. It is a topic that strikes fear into the hearts of even seasoned email marketers, and for good reason. Even the simplest email programs, it's hard to make an ESP change. It's highly complex, from selecting a new provider, working out what your infrastructure is going to look like, IP warming, that actual process. It is hugely time intensive, and it requires careful planning and thoughtful execution. It can also have a business critical impact on revenue if it goes wrong.
That's right. We are joined by Craig Hood, and we're going to draw on 10 years of experience running email at AstraZeneca, including how he survived an ESP migration in a highly regulated industry. Craig, not the first time you've joined us at Validity, but I think it's your first appearance on Email After Hours. It's such a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is the first time, but I have been interacting with you guys for a long time now, and I've been looking forward to this opportunity.
Welcome to the podcast crew now. You're part of the Email After Hours crew now. And before we get into the topic, and we always have an icebreaker question. This one is going to seem a little bit off topic, but Guy and I have been kind of teasing each other with this one for a little while. So I swear, bear with me. Craig, question to you. If email deliverability or email marketing were a pizza, what pizza would it be?
I say pepperoni because it's very spicy when it comes to trying to get through all the challenges associated to it.
It's a good answer, Guy. What about you?
You know, I've thought about this. I think I'd probably go with a Napolitana and, the traditional Italian version, sort of quite frugal on the ingredients so that you can really tease out that taste experience. Thin crust because you don't want to sort of overwhelm. I feel in that kind of direction, Danielle. What about you?
Okay, so I've been waiting as probably too long to say exactly what my email marketing pizza is. Okay, I think I order pizza in the exact perfect fashion to answer this question. When I order a pizza, I get two sides. So completely different toppings on either side. So it's segmented. Each side is customized, so it's personalized. And then I always get the crust well done, obviously, because we want the email campaigns to be well executed. So there's my very long-awaited answer on my email marketing pizza for you, Guy. I hope it was as good as I hoped it would be.
Craig, I think it's fair to say that AstraZeneca's email program is quite complex. And I was wondering, just to frame today's conversation, if you could walk our listeners through some of those complexities.
Sure, no problem. AZ has 20 plus different markets using multiple ESPs. The US market has not only headquarters to healthcare professionals, but they also have headquarters to consumers, which then complicates things even more because an HCP email address is maintained differently or lasts shorter than what you would see in a consumer, because most consumers get an email address and they just stick with it forever, where a healthcare professional has a journey of their email address to where they're still the same person, but they've moved from their initial graduating from college and working in a hospital to then going into their own practice, going to combined practices, maybe even go back to a hospital. So it's a a lot less shorter of a journey for an email address for that particular hospital or that healthcare professional. And then even with that, there comes a change of they don't necessarily share it with everybody that it's changed.
Absolutely. And, that's before we even start to factor in the fact that you're operating in multiple different countries and languages and laws and even behaviors. So you've got a lot to consider, before you even start thinking about an ESP migration. So, especially with scalability and data integrity and deliverability, all vital considerations. So, let's start at the beginning. You made a pretty major change of platforms a while back. What brought you and your AZ colleagues to the point where you knew that you needed to start looking for a new platform?
It probably was more of a marketing driven decision that our IT team stood up those. The challenging part with AstraZeneca is we really didn't have as much say into why we were changing as much as that we were changing. And we were there to be more reactive and making sure that things just didn't get messed up. And so it definitely was a challenge to kind of get through that forced migration, if you want to call it that. But in the end, we were able to be there and be successful.
I mean, that's sometimes what we hear is that like it's against our will. We're moving these ESPs. It comes from the top down sometimes.
They were volunteered.
For sure. And even choosing an ESP to move to can be a challenge in and of itself. Like there are considerations about which integrations are available, which list management features are available, what client support looks like from the new ESP. So in your opinion, Craig, how should senders, assuming this is not a forced migration, how should marketers and senders be vetting and selecting ESPs based on what their email program needs are? Like what should a sender be looking for?
So what has happened versus what I recommend is definitely been different. But I think that when you're looking at a platform, an ESP, you really need to not only look at the technology, but the support you're getting for email deliverability perspective. Currently today, we're with one ESP, and we're changing in the US specifically to another. And I'm a little concerned that that transition is not going to go as well because the support for email deliverability is not there. Now, Validity as a partner with AZ has been great all throughout my career, and I anticipate that the support is going to be a little bit more relied on Validity than what we've had before because I was able to use our ESP and their support along with Validity to kind of come up with my decisions around how to maintain it and if signs show up that something was going wrong, we work together to come up with the final solution of how AZ would manage it. So I definitely would say make sure that that ESP has email deliverability support and that they're working in collaborative with Validity to make sure that it's stood up.
Absolutely. And, so once you've decided who the new ASP is going to be that you're working with, the fun's just beginning, of course. And, now you're having to start to think about things like the sending infrastructure that you're going to need to support your email program. So what kind of considerations come into play at that point, based on your experience, things like how many IPs you're going to be running, what domains you're going to be requiring, that kind of thing.
So what we've tried to do is to make it as simple as possible to get things migrated from one ESP to the other. And then from there, based on demand, increase the IP or domains. I will tell you that when we did the current one the ESP that we're on now, it was not really thought of how GDPR would impact our campaigns that are in the US. So we actually had to recently go through a a domain migration to specifically separate out our healthcare professionals for US versus our HCPs that are for global markets. So then we didn't have any compliance consideration. So that's probably one thing I definitely would say is take into consideration how it could be stood up, simplify it, but make sure you're also meeting the compliance regulations requirements like GDPR.
Absolutely. I mean, that's such an essential. I mean, especially that you got compliance regulations like GDPR in around 20 US states now. You've got AI legislation coming into play. There's new accessibility legislation. I think they all have a role to play. I actually wanted to ask you a little sidebar question here, Craig, because I mean, your job title is email and SMS, and sometimes we neglect that second part. But was your SMS program also a consideration when you made this move?
And unfortunately, it was not. But I will tell you that when I say SMS, it's really been just SMS in the US. And as much as I would have liked to enhance or grow the global markets, there was always some challenges within each market as to whether the appropriate codes, short code, long code, 10DLC was allowed. And a lot of the markets, when they asked IT, hey, we want to do this, they never really look into what's available. And that's where it tends to be a little bit more complicated. But in terms of US, we've enhanced it from I think it was 3 initial SMS campaigns that we migrated for 3 different brands to over 12, and we've done gamut of SMS, MMS, 10DLC. So it was again not planned, but I know that this new migration that's going to be coming up in 2026 will include SMS globally. So I'm interested in seeing how it's going to be.
And now that the stage has been set, an ESP has been chosen, against your will or not, the infrastructure has been set up, we get to the actual warm up. And Guy and I have created our fair share of IP warming plans for different senders over the years. And we, of course, will turn to some tried and true best practices that we really abide by. So, for example, don't start your warm up on a Friday. That's just a tip from the top for everybody's sanity. Begin your warm up with recent engagers, low volumes, etc. Right? Do you agree with those best practices, Craig? And then also tell us a little bit about how the actual execution of your IP warming played out.
I absolutely agree. The one thing that I will tell, and I can't remember the gentleman's name that was on your podcast before, but he talked around Gmail being different than the rest of the ISPs. And I definitely learned through an issue that you cannot plan your migration with or your IP warming with not doing something different for Gmail. Because again, I ran into a situation where Gmail then ended up impacting our deliverability, and we ended up having to re-warm up Gmail specifically. So I agree 100%, Danielle, with your thought process, but I would add the aspect of considering Gmail volume. The bad part is it was for our healthcare professionals in the US, which most healthcare professionals' email addresses are not Gmail. So I think it was a combination of low volume and the trickling of those that kind of caused us the issue. But again, it's taking into consideration what you have in your database, understanding your domains, and then coming up with the plan accordingly.
So that conversation you were referencing, that was Michael Cabral from J. Jill. He's going to be delighted that you remembered that. For his sins, Craig, he went through 3 migrations in 3 years. So he sure tried. No, those we've kind of touched on this. Those first few weeks of an IP warming process are critical. Your content selection needs to be on point. You need to be ready to pivot, sometimes really fast. And I think at the best of times, we understand that pharma content can be particularly tricky. So specifically in terms of your content, was there any decisions that were taken in terms of, what message types you were going to kick off with first in the hope that it would prime the pump of your migration, if you will?
I don't know that we've adjusted the content, but I think that the challenging part was the planning of how do we minimize the impact for the marketing campaigns themselves. So then they kept running as expected, but then also chose the right volume with the new IP. And what we did was we chose a different subdomain that looked very similar to the one that we had. We went from an E dot to an H dot scenario to where we were able to manage that. Again, it worked out well when it came to the migration to where initially IT wanted to do marketing.astrazeneca.com, and I was just like, no, 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 we're not doing marketing because that just there in itself is going to challenge the receivers of the emails, be like, what do you mean you're marketing me? And like, no. So I think that's where using subdomains with minimal, maybe a single character or something like that would be a good opportunity to kind of not confuse the receivers and think that it's a different and have them see the transition.
Absolutely essential. I wanted to put in a little sidebar comment before we sort of come back to the migration conversation, but just curious to sort of hear your thoughts in terms of any other, content challenges which are perhaps unique to the pharma industry. I know that when we were preparing for today's conversation, you had some interesting thoughts and observations to share around, the increasing role of artificial intelligence, where it touches this conversation. Anything to share with our listeners there?
So I think the approach AZ has taken with artificial intelligence has been around the ability to establish content quicker and stand up the actual content, multiple versions of the content for the marketers. One thing that AZ has had in the past is you have an agency designs the content and then you hand it off to the marketers and the marketers tweak it. Then we build it in HTML, make sure it renders correctly, and then take it through our own med legal review process. And that's a lengthy amount of time it took to get us through that. In the end, we're using other AI tools to create our HTML that is efficiently improving the amount of time it takes to stand that up. The challenging part is it still requires a marketer to actually agree to the content and agree that, yes, I can say these 5 different versions. And in the end, it's helping us get to that point, but not necessarily determining which one to use. And then the other aspect we used AI is more around the output of the initial campaign in terms of not only opens and clicks, but what audience or segmentations will allow us to use and send that next second message or third message or fourth message. That's really the 2 areas that we've concentrated on.
Obviously, it just feels like AI has been kind of a buzz term, a key term. It's really coming to the fore right now in the way it's being leveraged, both by marketers, but also by mailbox providers. We're seeing just this increasing use of AI there too. And I want to just touch on the ways that email evolved in 2025. It felt like for the last couple of months there, every week we would be hearing about some sort of new evolution for the mailbox providers that would, kind of set out deliverability challenges for marketers that they had to respond to. And that's definitely not going to stop in 2026. So, Craig, in your mind, What were the biggest deliverability challenges or hurdles in 2025?
Internal within AZ, I think the only thing we saw was that Gmail scenario that I talked about when we were transitioning from one instance with the ESP to another one to separate GDPR or ex-US versus US. Some of the challenges that we're still investigating and what caused that probably is a little bit more than just, like I said, volume impact. But I really think that there was some content that we chose. AZ has established two different ways of looking at or types of campaigns that drive the next message. And I think that AZ's adjusting to that has been learning, not necessarily been that's the final version we're going to have. And I have a feeling that it's going to constantly be one after the other in terms of learning with that next iteration of how can we use AI to understand all the different, did somebody go to a website and register, or did somebody look at a Facebook page, or like that whole omni-channel approach is really going to be, the data has to be there in the ESP to decision off of it, and then appropriately have the content shown. And it's going to continue to be learning.
Absolutely. And as Daniel says, those changes have been relentless. Even in the last couple of years, you've got all the major mailbox providers introducing their bulk sender requirements of different flavors, all the changes in the inbox, subscription manager, sorted promotions tabs, that kind of thing. And so, you talk about another migration coming up next year, but the landscape that it's going to take place in is going to be very different to the landscape that your last one took place in. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that you would like to see AstraZeneca doing differently next time around based on those changes and your learnings from the previous experience?
I think that this next time around, there's going to be some opportunities with expansion to the number of IPs we use and the number of domains we use. I think that's going to be a key to customers recognizing that we're coming from that different domain for a specific Germany market or UK market or whatever. It's just going to require a lot more work to get us there, and that's the piece that is going to be a challenge. But I think that in the end, we're gonna be able to get it accomplished.
Fortunately, you've got a great email strategist to support you.
As we start to wrap up the conversation today, Craig, at this point, I think it's fair to say, with the ESP migrations you've dealt with the challenges in pharma and AZ, with whatever you've got going on, you're a bona fide email marketing veteran right now. And so I think it would be really useful for our listeners if you had to give them one piece of deliverability guidance. What would it be?
I think that the biggest challenge that I've had in my career is getting people above me and or the IT staff to understand that email deliverability has to be a priority. Because if you don't manage that, you're really going to have your campaigns can be designed perfectly to get to the right audience, to the with the right message. If you don't manage that email deliverability on a daily basis and understand and adjust accordingly, as you said, Guy, earlier, you're not going to have the open rates that you want. You're not going to have the click-through rates. And most marketers and leadership don't understand email deliverability. And that's where it's key in getting them to recognize this is a priority. This has to be a priority. And if there's anything I can definitely say to your listeners, that it's got to be a priority no matter what. You just have to make sure that you're influencing those people bottom up.
That's right. Otherwise, all that great work just falls at the first hurdle. Craig, we need to wrap up, but thank you so much for joining us today. And you've been really generous with your insights and your expertise and your experience. It's always easy to sort of celebrate the, everything you got right. It's always harder to talk about the bits that you got wrong, but those are the most valuable learnings of all. So really appreciate that. For listeners interested in connecting with you or learning more about today's conversation, is there a best way for them to reach out to you? Sort of LinkedIn as a preferred channel?
Yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best one.
Awesome. So fire up the conversations, listeners. And while we're at it, be sure to tune in again next time. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.org. That's where Email After Hours lives. You'll find all the old episodes and a load more great resources to help you become stronger senders.
And Guy and I are always super proud of the guests that we feature and the guests that join us on Email After Hours. And we're always looking for new guests too. So if you'd like to join us on a future episode, drop us a comment, reach out to us on LinkedIn, or definitely drop us an email at emailafterhours@validity.com. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye now. Be sure to tune in next time and hit subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And don't forget to visit senderscore.com for loads more great resources to help you become a stronger sender.
To all you sleepless senders out there, thank you for joining us after hours, and see you next time.